Okay, let's see if I can keep this hopefully under 20 minutes. Again, my name is David Corbett. I live in Marion. I previously was on the fire department here as a firefighter, EMT, part-time police officer. I currently work as a nurse. I've got a background in IT. I grew up on a farm. Basically, I just grew up around dirt and trying to give back to my community. This is something I would like to start to do that. I would like to call this effort the Croft at Hope House. The Croft, or a Croft, is a small farm in Scotland. So I also play bagpipes, so Scottish Connect. It's going to be a rather ambitious undertaking, seeking to provide space for a community garden alongside research plots, all tied together with teaching. The effort will be paying back our primary partner, Hope House Ministries, with a selection of fruit, fresh produce, and opportunities for clients to learn from the garden and to use the fresh bounty. So I know that food distribution is one of the primary things that Hope House does to their clients, and being able to find good, wholesome food in a decent quantity that they actually like and will use can be a challenge sometimes. Um, and I'm hoping to find out about how much y'all actually do give out to give me an idea of how much I would need to be able to grow to help supply that. Now, I'm not, just to be honest, I'm not looking for every single thing that we harvest to go directly to Hope House. I want to give a good percentage, something that would be worth the land, it's kind of as a rent in a way of paying back. But I would also like to have a significant amount that could go through some other kind of channel, possibly to raise money for the effort to channel back into it so that it can continue and improve. Kind of the three legs of it's going to be community research and teaching, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The space that I'm looking at, again, rather ambitious. It's not being used at the moment. It's just a bunch of grass that somebody's having to mow. So I don't know who's mowing it and funding the time and the fuel and the equipment to get it mowed. But right now, somebody's having to spend something. I want to make use of it. And whoever's having to pay for it now won't have to pay for it in the future. About 2 acres, depending on how you measure it out, leaving out the right of ways, of course, is about 1.75 to 2 acres. It's currently got grass, some gravel, and asphalt. Good visibility, you know where it is because that's where you are. This is kind of a layout of what I came up with. There's actually 5 different growing areas, and then in the very center where that A is, that circle, is some kind of a gazebo, some kind of a structure, be it round, be it square, be it rectangular. That'll be the focal point for the whole thing, kind of the headquarters, you might say, meeting room, shade when you're working, get out of the rain, things of that nature. Starting at the very top center where you see the squares, that would initially be the community garden. Those would be raised beds that people could essentially rent for their own garden. Either they're in an apartment and have no land, they're renting a house, and even though they have a yard, they're not allowed to have a garden. But just a place to come together if you do, or a place to have a garden if you don't have your own land. That can get bigger and smaller as the need and interest rises. Going to the top right would be some traditional single row, single crop garden like your grandmother would have done. Going below that, something called hugelkultur. To the center, companion planting, and over to the left next to the railroad tracks would be a food forest. And all this would not happen the first year. We'd take it as we have the energy, the time, the resources. So it might take 3 or 4 years to really get all of these areas even started, and places, especially like the food forest, is a multi-year thing for it to grow and become functional. It's not like your traditional rows or raised beds where everything's an annual. You plant it, you harvest it, 1 or 2 crops that year. Some of it may be but a lot of it's going to take, fruit trees take years to come into their own, things of that nature. I'd also like to have some walking paths. That's kind of where you see the B in that cross. So that'd be a way to get from area to area, nice and clean, nice open. Wheelbarrows, golf cart kind of, gator type vehicles, possibly even pickup trucks and small tractor, something where you can move material around. And it would also be surrounded by one of these paths. So you could really get around with some kind of light motorized vehicle to help move materials. Um, a living fence around the whole thing, which I'll talk about later, and even some outdoor art. I want this whole thing to feel almost like a park in a way, where people want to be there. It's an inviting place to be. If people enjoy being there, you're going to have more hands to help with the labor as well. And community, again, 15 to 20% of it at the very beginning would be dedicated to a community garden. The people would rent that space, and either with money, with time, or with produce that they grow going back to Hope House. Maybe kind of like a tithe. You may not call it that, but something along the lines of the tithe. 10% of what you harvest from your bed, you turn back, and then we donate that to Hope House to be distributed. This is just a picture of one community garden that I found. And so you see each person would have a different one of these boxes, and they plant whatever they want in there, so you end up with a great variety. The basic rules for that would be no pesticides, no Sevin dust, no chemicals of that nature, because the whole thing may not be certified organic, but I want to keep it as organic as possible. And maybe your neighbor next to your box wants to keep theirs, they're growing this for their kids. They don't want Sevin dust. They don't want neonicotinoids all over what they're going to feed. Well, if you're right next to them, your spray might go over there. So keep it organic. Basic rules such as if it's not yours, don't touch it. You've got your box. You've got your garden. I don't care if your neighbor's tomatoes are going nuts and they haven't been there in 2 weeks. If it's not yours, don't touch it. That's theirs. By the same token, we're not going to touch yours. So if your garden is good, it's because you're out there, you're maintaining it, you're planting it, you're watering it, you're harvesting it, you're weeding it. We're not going to do that for you. So if it grows totally up, then oh well, and then maybe you don't get that box the next year and we have to clean it out and somebody else gets it. But you'll provide everything for it. You provide the seeds, the plants, the water, the organic fertilizer, whatever it is you need to grow, just like it was in your backyard, it's yours. So that's how you learn. That's how you teach your kids. Research, large part of it. I want to compare and contrast about 3 or 4 different types of gardening methods to see how they do. Learn how to do them. How do they affect the soil? Is one, even though it may be not what we're used to, it may actually be more productive for the inputs. Again, it's not all about how much can you get off of the land, but how much can you get for what you put in. So, if you may be able to get 2 tons out of a plot of land with chemical fertilizers, pesticides, heavy tillage and all that, but maybe we get 1 ton, but do it in a way where we don't have to spend money on all that other stuff. So you just do a more of a natural way of doing it, so you get much lower inputs and still a moderate to good output. And also just want to see how they affect the soil. Can we take this soil, which currently is growing Bermuda grass, it's got a lot of gravel in it, some places have actually got some asphalt, it's not really good dirt at the moment. Can we turn that into something that would be, most gardeners would be envious of over time with our methods? This is just 2 different soils. I've been wanting to do this every year to see how they change. Compacted, not a lot of organic material on the left, lots of organic material on the right. That's the direction I want to go. Partner with the extension service, maybe some universities, Memphis Tilth, 4-H clubs, master gardeners, whoever, to get resources, to get expertise, soil cores, soil testing, and help even tracking the changes. In the best case scenario, I'd love to get somebody, a graduate student that needs a project and needs a laboratory. We can be the laboratory. They can help do the actual research part of it, and we all gain from it. And then, of course, teaching. What we learn, we share. So whether it's just teaching, somebody being able to teach their children how to grow a tomato, how to grow a pepper, and then how to use that in a recipe, whether it's how to cook with fresh herbs, whether it's the different gardening methods. Um, Again, just passing it on, just passing it on. Here we've got somebody probably at a school, and they're teaching how to plant. It looks like some tomatoes and other things there. So success, of course, is not only growing things that we can eat, but inspiring others to prepare, eat, and share something that they grew. The gardening methods, at the beginning at least, that I want to compare and contrast are your traditional single species row, companion planting, hugelkultur, and food forest. Single species rows, this is what your grandma did. You had your garden out back of the house, and you had 2 or 3 rows of corn, 2 or 3 rows of okra, 2 or 3 rows of tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, but everything was in a row, and the only thing in that row was that crop. And then maybe next year all of them got moved around, but still you had a row of one thing. Lots of weeding, lots of soil that was bare a lot of times. But that's what we're used to, and it works. Companion planting would be something similar. It may be in a row, it may not, but you're planting 2, 3, 4 different things interspersed that help each other in one way or another. It might be planting beans right next to corn because the corn needs nitrogen and the beans give nitrogen. And instead of doing a lot of mulching or a lot of weeding, you grow some kind of a ground cover, something that grows low to the ground to help keep the soil cool, keep it moist, and shade out the weeds. So, they're not competing for height, they're not competing for nutrients, maybe competing a little bit for moisture, but you're getting 3 crops in the same amount of space. So this, would be one version of a companion planting. You've got things next to each other. In this case, with the flowers, I think they're basically trying to discourage pests, bring in pollinators, and also just make it an colorful, inviting place for us as well. The corn, beans, and squash is what they call a 3 sisters. It's been around for generations. I'm not sure how many people actually do it. Give it a try. Let's see if it works. Hugelkultur is something a little different, at least for this area, and it's a way of using up trees that have been cut down that otherwise something would have to be done with. You mound them up. You take the trunks and you lay them on their sides, maybe even dig a trench and stick them down in a trench. And then the medium-sized limbs and the small limbs, and then you cover the whole thing with dirt. You end up with a mound. You plant into that mound of dirt. It's kind of a long row even of a mound. Not only is it supposedly good for moisture retention, as the wood breaks down, it acts like a sponge for the moisture, so you don't have to water as much when it gets in the heat of the summer. But they also give off nutrients as they break down, and they're going to be breaking down over like 5 to 10 years. So this is a long-term commitment, long-term experiment here. It also stretches the amount of space you've got. So if you're going vertical, then that 100 by 100 plot, you might actually get 150 by 150 of surface area to plant in just because you went vertical. So another way of getting more crops at the same amount of space. This is just some artwork that I found about how it kind of looks. Again, you've got trunks on the top left. Everything's on top of the ground. You mound it up. Top right, you see they've actually dug a trench, buried all the trees and limbs and stuff in that, so the mound isn't quite as tall, but you still kind of have that core of decomposing wood as a moisture sponge and fertilizer over the next few years. Food forest is kind of the extreme of all that, of getting away from the traditional rows. You've got multiple layers and levels of plants. So you might have fruit trees, you might have oak trees, something nice and tall. Then you've got the next story down of small trees, tall bushes, tall shrubs, and then you end up with just 3 or 4 different stories or layers in height, all the way down to the ground cover. It may be that the tall one is a fruit tree, which you get fruit off. It may be that the tall one is an oak tree, that gives you deep roots for pulling nutrients up, which then go into the leaves. The leaves fall in the forest, and that helps build the humus layer or humus layer for the other plants around it. In permaculture, they also would call this a guild. So you've got a central focal tree, and then you plant other shrubs and trees and plants around it in a little mini community, that everything benefits everything else. And then when you've got several of these guilds together, you end up with a food forest. This is one drawing or artist rendering of one particular food forest. Here's a picture of what it might actually look like. I mean, it kind of looks like just an overgrown field, but it's actually being managed to some degree. There would be edible crops in there, herbs, things that bring in pollinators, other things that are there specifically because they grow up, bulk out a whole lot, and then you cut them down and use them as a mulch around the other trees. In that gazebo thing in the middle, something like this would be fairly easy to throw up, and could be used for a lot of different things. This would be your initial meeting place each day, a place to get out of the rain, get out of the sun. You could hold classes underneath it if we had did some farmers market kind of thing. It could start underneath this, or this could be where we sell our own stuff while other vendors come in, and sell theirs. But it would be a central focal point, meeting place to really anchor that this is something serious and it's going to be here for a while. In my mind's eye, I would love to see something of this nature where it would be actually the top of a grain bin, some of those pretty decent sized grain bins, that cone up on top with maybe 1 or 2 rings, and then up high enough on poles or something that you could get under. So that's the structure, and it really screams agriculture, and it would be very unique. I don't know if that can be accomplished or not, but stretch goals. Uh, Storage, obviously, eventually we would end up with hoes and rakes, and might even have a tiller or small lawn tractor, or things of that nature. I can't cart all this back and forth every day, and I work Monday through Friday, doing home hospice, visiting people's homes. So there may be somebody else that needs to be there through the day, and volunteers coming in and out. So anything that we have there, we need to keep secure. Portable buildings are great. They're easy to build. They can be rented. They can be brought on site, up and running really fast. Problem is, they're not necessarily the most secure thing. So while I would definitely not thumb my nose at a good, a nice portable building for an office or for storage, something like one of these containers would be much, much more secure. I mean, they're solid steel. You can cut windows in them like this one is, but not necessarily have to be done. I mean, they can be chained and bolted, and somebody determined enough is still going to get in, but they're going to have to work for it. They're not that expensive, and they can actually be hidden and not be an eyesore. I know the thought of just taking a couple of those brown containers with the lettering and wording on them, would just be a bit of an eyesore, and it'd probably be an invite for somebody to come through and tag them with some spray paint. But they can be painted to blend in, and then you can put some shrubs and things around them and hide them, so you've got secure storage. Just something to think about for the future, and I'd like to bring it up so that somebody doesn't freak out if we decide to do something and it's approved. Living fence, again, it would be nice to have a fence around the whole thing, but it doesn't have to be a chain link fence. That's expensive, and it just screams stay out, stay away, and I want this whole thing, if it screams anything, to scream come in, get involved. Living fences can be made out of willow. They can be made out of fruit trees, and I'll show you a couple of examples. Here's willow. So we plant 5 or 10 feet of it. Then the next year, when we trim it back to make it neat, we take those branches and we use that to plant the next 5 or 10 feet. And then the third year, now we've got 20 feet worth, so we can plant another 20 feet. And over the course of 3 to 5, 10 years, we can surround the whole thing with a living fence, whether it's willow or something else. This is just one example. There's many ways of doing it. This is actually a fruit tree. So we throw up some kind of a temporary fence there, even if it's green post and wire, and then we grow fruit trees and trellis them almost like grapevines that over 5 to 10 years become more inviting and then become productive in and of themselves. So you not only have a fence, you've got more produce that we can then distribute through Hope House and sell and use and give class. Obviously, this is going to take some money in time. The first part, digging up dirt and throwing some seeds out, it's not that big of a deal. But putting up some kind of a structure or gazebo, coming up with shipping containers, possibly insurance of some kind, becoming a 501(c) takes some money in the beginning, and I think that that's something we should look into, or I would like to look into for this. I'm not asking y'all to do all the work. I'm really not asking y'all to do any of the work. I'm just asking permission to be able to do it myself and to pull other people and organizations in. But it will take some money. So we need to come up with ways to bring in money that we can turn around and reinvest. Talk about more of that in a second. Operating expenses. Some of the material I can get. Leaf mold, and what that is leaves that somebody has vacuumed up and mulched and let it sit for 5 or 10 years and compost down. It's called leaf mold. I can get almost all of that that we could possibly use, and all we got to do is go get it. I've already talked to the city. They've got piles of it. We could just go get it. The wood chips, they've got piles of that. Every year they're getting more of it. All we got to say is dump it here, and they'll dump it for free. Then we just have to move it, maybe shred it a little bit more. So some things we can do for free, but again, some things we'll eventually need some money for. I'd like to be able to get introduced to Mr. Lucas with the city of West Memphis to clarify what we can and can't do and see if there's any wiggle room with variances. I believe that currently we can grow things anywhere. You can garden anywhere in the city. It doesn't matter what it's zoned for, and y'all are currently zoned commercial/industrial. I don't think that we can currently do what's being done there and also grow things and sell it on site. So that would either need to be a variance, or we would need to come up with some other way to market what we grow through another fruit stand, through a farmer's market, through some other method, so that what we grow we can turn into cash that we can then reinvest to improve the property over the long term. I would love to be able to actually do a farmer's market there on site weekly, at least part of the year. I think that's been the major thing that's kept West Memphis from having an actual farmer's market. Is they keep trying. They've moved it 2 or 3 different places. Different people have stepped up, but they try to do it once a month. And you're just not going to get a farmer's market really off the ground once a month. It needs to be once a week. And this would be an excellent location, especially in the beginning before everything's all planted, because we got plenty of room, high visibility, easy to get to. It'd be great. If we could do that, then I think that would lead to volunteers, that would lead to donations, and possibly even just some cash right there, just saying, hey, you've got your booth, and it's $10 a month for your spot. There's a little bit of cash. I've talked about the 501(c). Those are not easy. Those are not cheap. So it's, getting that, but it opens up a lot of doors when going, especially to corporate sponsors, going to the lumber yards like True Value or something like that, saying, we really could use some lumber for some raised beds. If you're a 501(c), they get a tax write-off. Otherwise, they're going to say, well, there's the scrap stuff in the back, take what you want. So what I need to be able to continue with this, again, I'm not asking y'all for any money. I'm not asking any one of y'all to lift a finger to do anything. All I'm asking for is the land and a multi-year written permission to do that so that I can move forward. And then the rent for that land, obviously you need something back. You're not going to give it to me for free. The rent going back to you would just be a percentage of whatever we grow, and hopefully if I can find out how much y'all use or want and exactly what, then that's what we can grow. You know, I could grow 3 truckloads of kohlrabi, but in this area, I don't think that people are going to have any idea what it is or how to use it. But if I know that your clients really enjoy and will use lots of tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, things like that, then of course that's what we need to plant, and then do some of the other stuff for fun too. The introduction to Mr. Lucas, maybe some help with, you know, gaining any kind of variances we need, and of course volunteers and visibility.